Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Correct Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2011 animated adventure comedy titled Puss in Boots. Now, Puss in Boots runs for 1 hour and 30 minutes long. It is directed by Chris Miller. The script was written by Tom Wheeler. The story was done by Brian Lynch, Will Davies, and Tom Wheeler. It is produced by Joe M. Aguilar and Latifa Oweyu. The story is basically a spin-off of the DreamWorks Shrek films, but its actual origins is from the novel or the story by French Renaissance author by the name of Charles Perrault. It is composed by Henry Jackman, and it was edited by Eric Dapkowicz. And the stars of the movie are Antonio Banderas, featuring the voice talents of Antonio Banderas, Salma Hayak, Zach Galifianakis, Billy Bob Thornton, Amy Sedaris, Constance Marie, Mike Mitchell, Guillermo del Toro, and Chris Miller. Okay, so while Shrek may have run its course after the fourth installment, it doesn't mean that the Shrek universe definitely has to come to an end. With so many beloved characters that came from the series, it was definitely an open territory for them to branch their own series of adventures to give them the opportunity for further character development. Now, although as a standalone story itself, Puss in Boots is based off of a children's story set back around the 17th, 18th century. But here, thanks to the magic of DreamWorks, Puss in Boots is a spin-off of the Shrek movies. Puss in Boots actually debuted in the second installment of the Shrek movies, and this was the perfect choice to get spun off, even though the origins of his character dates back to the Renaissance period, where the new ideas of what to do with this character is definitely all under the creative minds of DreamWorks Animation. So although they're taking a classic story from a Renaissance period and adapting it with its own interpretations, its own stories, its own adventures, while at the same time still trying to stay true to its origins. So when Puss in Boots made his debut in Shrek 2, I was invested in him in terms of his design and his character. I mean, he is just a mysterious feline who is definitely an outlaw in the town he was brought up in, which was San Ricardo, which I guess is almost like what could be described as 17th, 18th century Spain. But at least we get to see the origin of his story and everything that kind of like predates to when he came into the life of Shrek, Fiona, Donkey, and the rest of the other gang. The fact that he was a noble hero who was deadly with a rapier, he definitely still had the adorable charm, mostly due to his manipulative facial expressions, that even though he is a fierce fighter, he still has not forgotten that he is still a cat. Sure, he's intelligent beyond the years, and sure, he can walk on 2 feet, he can speak English, but he still also can lap milk by licking its tongue, and that he still has those cute, adorable cat's eyes, and that, every once in a while he'll still have the cat instincts, so meowing when needed to. Not only is he a skilled, trained fighter, he's also a master of mind games. If he doesn't beat you in a physical sense, he could still circle jerk around you like any average manipulative cat. Let's face it. He might be intelligence beyond the levels of his species, but he's still a cat first top priority. To show they are not completely broken away with the Shrek movies, Puss in Boots still follows the same trajectory by crossing paths with various nursery rhyme and fairy tale characters. Although maybe Shrek may have went a little overboard by bringing in one fairy tale character after another, Puss in Boots, well, it's still pretty much in its infancy to be made as a Shrek spin-off. Who knows if they make more sequels? I know they are coming up with a sequel that's supposed to be out released just around before Christmas time. I believe December 21st. They are going to have a Puss in Boots sequel called Puss in Boots The Last Wish. Will there be more fairy tale nursery rhyme crossovers? We'll soon find out. But here we have it still, although much to a much more lesser extent, because Puss in Boots wants to be its own movie, its own franchise. Not by being like a standalone where it would just completely ignore everything that Shrek did. No, we have crossovers, just like Shrek. And aside from being, still told in the same tradition of the Charles Perrault story, we have, of course, different spins. We're introduced to new characters. We're introduced to a new setting, a new outlook. And everything just seems very, very original and very, very fresh. So the story goes something like this. Puss, voiced by Antonio Banderas, has become an outlaw after being betrayed by characters who he once thought were his friends, but is now in pursuit of taking the magic beans that are currently in the hands of Jack and Jill, voiced by Billy Bob Thornton and Amy Sedaris, so that it can grow up the beanstalk and it can enter the giant's castle to get the goose that lays the golden eggs, in hopes to also regain his reputation, to help try to restore the faith in his town of San Ricardo that has been lost due to jealousy, due to envy, and due to betrayal from a person who once Puss thought was like a brother to him. Not a brother by biological, but by blood. They grew up together, almost like brothers, although they're not conventionally brothers. So to get the magic beans, Puss can't do this all on his own, much to his chagrin. Joining him on his mission is an equally skilled fighter by the name of Kitty Southpaws, voiced by Salma Hayak, who also seems to be quite the badass herself. Perhaps she could be even more sneakier and manipulative than Puss, and can sometimes play mind games at a much better capacity than him. They too also have a bit of an on-again, off-again type relationship. At first they almost appear as bitter rivals, but then they eventually become more and more aligned with each other. The other person who is also involved in Puss's life is Humpty Alexander, Dumpty, voiced by Zach Galifianakis. Now, what are the relationships between Puss and Humpty Dumpty? Well, apparently Puss and Humpty were once raised in the same orphanage. And when they were young, they were at one time the best of friends. This is where the whole blood brothers things come about. Sure, they're not conventionally brothers because one's a cat and the other is an egg. But while Puss and Kitty run on with wonderful chemistry as both rivals and allies, I thought the most interesting scenes or the most interesting subplot story is involving the on again, off again, revolving door relationship between Puss in Boots and Humpty Dumpty. Puss was an abandoned cat who was found at his master Imelda's house. She took him in, she adopted him. He was raised in the orphanage along with Humpty Dumpty, and they were pretty much the best of friends. But then, all of a sudden, jealousy and betrayal had come into effect. Puss eventually ended up becoming an outlaw because of Humpty making one bad decision after another, almost to a point where Puss became kind of an outlaw, while Humpty pretty much, well, he's been also in and out of trouble too. Puss and Humpty, they grew up in the orphanage in San Ricardo, Mexico. Once Puss became a fierce vigilante, Humpty became neglected, and then committed an act that got both him and Puss in trouble, and Puss has not forgiven him since then. And, of course, after not seeing each other for a many number of years, Humpty wanted to try to, make it up to him by aligning himself and Kitty Southpaws in order to search for and retrieve the magic beans that are in possession of Jack and Jill. They eventually managed to successfully, although it was a bit of a struggle, to finally successfully retrieve the magic beans from Jack and Jill. They, of course, like in the trajectory of Jack and the Beanstalk, and buried it in the ground. Then we had, of course, the Beanstalk. They climb the magic beanstalk. They get the golden eggs, or the goose that laid the golden eggs. They bring it back down. Of course, they also had to try to avoid a very, very big burden. Get it? Okay. Yeah.
Oh, let me guess. Was it a giant?
It was a giant, but it was not the giant. But it was a giant nonetheless. Apparently, the giant is not like in the form of a human. You see, in the giant's castle, the giant wasn't the only giant living there. In fact, the giant wasn't even a human. It happened to be a 50-foot angry mother goose who did not take very kindly of having her baby abducted by Puss, Kitty, and Humpty Dumpty. But once they managed to retrieve the goose that lays the golden eggs, they restored the town. But then it was later revealed that this was all just a ruse, and this was all just a setup, because once again, Puss finds himself being back as an outlaw once again, and Humpty once again betrayed him. And this was also, it seemed that Kitty Southpaw was somewhat involved in this whole situation too. So once again, there's a lot of really complexities in the relationship between Puss and Humpty. One minute they're friends, next minute they're enemies. Then they're friends again, then they're enemies. There's a lot of face to heel turns. There's a lot of betrayal in this movie. And Humpty seems to be somewhat always behind it. One minute you're his friend, he tries to put that trust in those puppy dog eyes. But then, at the last minute, he betrays him. Kind of sometimes. I mean, here's the thing about him. One minute he's like a protagonist, next minute he's a villain. He always seems to somewhat does him in. And then we come to a climax where Puss tries to, tries to save the goose that lays the golden eggs and Humpty from plunging to their deaths. Now I know Puss is still very angry at Humpty for the way that he has circle jerked him over the years. And then Humpty eventually decides, after all the bad things that I've done, I don't deserve to live. But still somehow Puss finds in his heart not to want to let go of Humpty. But Humpty decides, after what I've done, I don't deserve your friendship. I don't deserve anything. And he eventually plunges to his death. I mean, there's a lot of tragedy in this story. And even though there's a lot of comedy, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of adventure in this movie. And yes, you find a lot of dramatic, tragic tragedy in the Shrek movies. But Puss in Boots kind of takes it to a whole new level. And even though it's still, made for kids and all, because, look, there's all kinds of larger-than-life characters, and these are all iconic characters from nursery rhymes and fairy tales that we have all grew up with as children. There is still a lot of adult themes in this movie that make it seem something that's pleasing for both the young and the older audience. The first half of this movie runs at a very rapid speed, and unlike Shrek, the humor is done at a much more mellow delivery instead of somewhat over the top. There is much more dramatic tension in this story compared to Shrek, and while the second half starts to pick up more on the plot that had me intrigued, when you think that nothing climactic happens, something will likely catch you off guard. There's a lot of unpredictability in this story. The startling revelation from one of the characters transpires, and then finally we are treated to an exciting climax in the end. It's refreshing to see that Puss doesn't go into full-on cookie-cutter good guy while refraining to keep his heroic status intact. Now, even though in the end of the movie he's not still fully forbidden, he's still an outlaw, at least he actually still manages to go on and live another day. And of course, this is there's gonna be a sequel coming in December. I hope people are looking forward to it. Because, if this is gonna be as good and if it's gonna live up to the sequel, I really hope you guys look forward to it as well. In all honesty, I mostly enjoyed Puss in Boots. The driving force was not necessarily the humor, though it did exist. I mean, Puss somehow managed to overcome a lot of adversaries by using manipulation and fighting skills. There is still a lot of great humor that goes at a very quick pace. But it's the action, the drama, and the positive message about everyone deserving a second chance in redeeming himself from those who wronged you. It definitely does bring that message across, and I think it tells the story very, very, very effectively. The three main voice actors being Antonio Banderas, Salma Hayak, and Galifianakis were spot on in their performances that I really, really enjoyed. I thought that they did a bang up job bringing us humor, adventure, action, and everything just blends in very nicely. And I think Puss definitely has enough material for a possible sequel, and I hope that the one coming out this year will be something to really truly look forward to. So therefore, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, yeah, I know I made this one a little bit more shorter, but then again, sometimes the old saying goes, less means more. If I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give Puss in Boots a 9 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I'll be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Rat Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.